Aloha, folks. You are listening to Inside the Desert Oasis Room, episode number 131. This episode is sponsored by Tandawai Rum, the world's largest rum producer and winner of over 170 international medals in the past 4 decades. Check out their webpage at tandawaiusa.com or follow them on Facebook or Instagram at tandawaiusa. This podcast is also sponsored by the Tonga Hut. Opened in 1958, the Tonga Hut in North Hollywood is LA's oldest continuously run tiki bar. Dine in a secret tiki hideaway or learn about rum and rum history at one of their educational seminars. And if you're up to the challenge, take the journey to join the Loyal Order of Drooling Bastards. For information on events, Rum Club, and more, go to tongahut.com or find them on Facebook or Instagram. This episode is sponsored by the Tiki Bar T-Shirt Club, where their monthly T-shirt designs pay tribute to a Polynesian bar or restaurant from days long past. Each design is available for a limited time and will never be produced again. For more information and to check out this month's shirt, visit tikibartshirtclub.com. Today we chat with Drew Brophy. Drew Brophy is a world-renowned lifelong artist, surfer, and traveler whose career expanded in the late 1990s when he began painting surfboards using techniques he developed with water-based paint pens. On this episode, we join Drew in his gallery and studio to chat about how he got his start as an artist, some fun stories of his travel adventures, his philosophies on life, and how his art has evolved and continues to evolve in this ever-changing world. As always, I hope you enjoy this episode as much as we did bringing it to you. And if you did, hit that subscribe button. Subscribing makes it easier for you to follow our adventures. Shares on your social media pages are always appreciated. And if you'd like to help support the show, go to desertoasisroom.com to pick up some merch or make a donation. This podcast does not survive without the help of its sponsors or its listeners. So every purchase or donation, no matter the size, is totally appreciated and helps keep this podcast coming to you every week. Okay, here he is, artist, surfer, traveler, and more. Give it up for Drew Brophy.
Inside the Desert Oasis Room.
Aloha, folks, and welcome back to another episode of Inside the Desert Oasis Room. Guess who I've got in the studio today? Well, actually, we're not in my studio. We're in his studio. We've got the one and only Drew Brophy. Welcome, Drew.
Yeah, how you doing, folks? Life is good.
I've been wanting to have Drew on this show for a long, long time. Drew and I met way back in 2000. I want to say 2002 because it was at a Tiki Farmer event that Holden had called the Big Old Tiki Bash.
That thing was crazy. I remember that. It was a ton of people.
It was nuts. So, you know that it was way back when this whole Tiki revival was just starting. Mm-hmm. You know, like people were just kind of figuring out what it was. Yeah. And I got into the scene like really early, even before the Book of Tiki came out. It was just something that I liked from basically surfing. When I was younger, my parents or my grandparents, they would take me to Don the Beachcomber and that kind of stuff. But the Tiki stuff really, like, it was first became a thing to me when I was surfing, you know, growing up surfing in Orange County. And when I met Drew, and this is funny because we were just reminiscing about this, it was during this event I was buying a mug that he was hand painting feverishly because there was this long line of people. And he was trying to get all these mugs painted so that he could sell them at this show. And when he sold me this mug, it was still sticky from the paint. So
yeah, it wasn't even dry yet.
It wasn't even dry yet. I brought it in, and I got a kick out of seeing your reaction to seeing that.
Yeah. You know, it was so much fun, you know, because when you do the tiki mugs and, you know, you have all the bisques, you know, there, and then you have all the glazes come out, and they're really cool. But for me, like, I always want them to have more character, and so to be able to paint just the raw bisque and make them the way I wanted to was really rad.
It was awesome. I'm so happy that I got one. It was probably the most expensive thing I bought that night too.
Yeah. It still looks great.
Yeah, it looks awesome. Well, that's because I put it up on a shelf that you can't mess around with it, So it's up high. I had to get on a ladder to bring it down so that I could.
Did?
Yeah, so that I could bring it here.
I'd be drinking Mai Tais out of it.
But I love it. So I want to kind of delve into who Drew Brophy is, because I think you've got a really interesting story. I want to start with all the way from the beginning, like how you got started, your background. Did you always want to be an artist?
Yeah, so I got into this because I love to surf. I love the waves and I love the ocean. I grew up in South Carolina, of all places.
Oh, really?
Which is like super far away from anything, and I kind of grew up in the middle of nowhere. And the one thing I had going for me is the beach. A lot of people don't even realize South Carolina has coastline, but we have a beautiful coastline there. And I had a love with the ocean, and I had a love for everywhere in the world. I used to look at National Geographics and see all these wonderful places in the world, and Surfer magazine. And surfers are so lucky because they get to go to some of the most beautiful places on the planet, and a lot of them just happen to be in the South Pacific.
Yeah.
And I dreamed of going to all those places, and I kind of made it my mission in life to visit as many places in the world that I could. And by the time I was 25, I'd already been to a lot of them. And so traveling to, of course, Hawaii. I lived in Hawaii for a long time, and then but visited Tahiti quite a bit. I've been to Tahiti a bunch of times, and, trips to Samoa and Fiji and New Zealand and Indo, and, just going to all these places, and just really inspired by the culture, the waves, of course, and the beauty. And I was a surfer first and artist second.
Yeah. And
I got into doing art because I used to paint my own surfboards. And in order to pay for my way traveling around the world, I would work in surfboard factories. So I was lucky enough that everywhere I went, they made surfboards. And so I've actually worked in factories in 16 different countries around the world.
Wow.
Painting surfboards.
So would you say that the art thing then kind of, it came as like a natural part of that? Or was there something that made you decide, I want to be an artist, and you wanted to pursue it as a career?
It was the only thing I was good at. So the short answer is no, I didn't really get to pick. It was like, I feel everybody gets dealt a set of cards in life, the things they're good at. And, being from South Carolina, I kind of felt like I got a pair of twos, surfing and art. And I wasn't even that good of an artist when I was younger. I was decent, but I'm like, okay, I got these two cards to play. How am I going to play them? And I feel like I played them pretty good.
I know the answer to a lot of the questions that I ask, but I think that what our listeners would find fascinating is, and correct me if I'm wrong, you actually don't even have formal art training, right? You didn't go to art school.
No, I wanted to. I would have loved to go to school or have somebody to teach me, but it just wasn't in the cards for me. So I asked myself at a very, I guess around 18, 19 years old, if I died today, what would I be sad I haven't done?
Right.
And that was to travel to these places and surf big waves and, experience life.
Right.
And that was my only plan. And it worked out. So, yeah, I didn't have any education. But what I did have is I met so many wonderful people around the world who gave me their time, and they gave me tips. And so I'm a product of lots of little bits of information that thousands of people have given me.
Well, your art and your success as an artist has proven that sometimes the best way to learn is just by doing.
Yes.
Right? And by looking at your work, I wouldn't think that you didn't go to art school, because it's just so damn cool.
Yeah, thanks. I tell artists all the time, if there's any artist out there listening, that it doesn't matter how good you are. Somebody's going to love it and somebody's going to hate it, no matter what you do. you just need to focus on the people who love it. And for me, when I started, my art wasn't that great, but it was good enough to make a life for myself.
Yeah.
And I got better, and I got better, and I got better. And so now, 30 years later of doing art, and I am pretty good. And I only just recently I feel like
you're more than pretty good.
But just, I finally feel like I'm good enough to create something amazing, and I really do love creating things, and a lot of people don't even know what being an artist is, and being an artist is thinking differently.
Okay.
It's being able to see the world differently. And so most people are walking around, only seeing very little, almost like they have blinders on. So if you imagine an artist is like wide open. So I'm like, hypersensitive, and I just notice everything. And when I'm working with whether it's a band or a surf client or a company like Google, I'm listening to what they want and what's going to look cool. I tell people it's my job to make things look cool. So they have a problem with something, it could be an album cover or advertising campaign or t-shirt or tiki mug. But it's my job to listen and then create something great that people are going to like. And it's actually thinking. It's not, it's
right.
In that those thoughts come from real experiences.
Yeah.
So especially like when I think of things that are, what I love, surfing and the beauty of nature and even tikis themselves, it comes from being there.
Yeah.
It's authentic,
Yeah.
I've hiked through the mountains in Tahiti to get to the center of the island where they have this big like sacred site with like stuff carved into the ground and all these like giant stone tiki carvings. And half the people on the island's never even been there.
Wow.
And I would talk to people about it. They're like, yeah, I've never even heard of that place. And, it took me all day to get there.
Yeah.
And so anything that I do comes from real experience. And I think that's why people like it. They it's not just how I do the art. They know that I'm living it.
I'm sure people can also relate to it, because when you were starting out and you were painting surfboards, I bet other surfers were looking at it and they were saying, oh, look at that. That feels like that stoke you get from having an awesome day out in the water.
Yeah.
But also along the same lines, this stuff that I'm looking at on the walls here, and we're going to talk about the different styles that you're painting now, but the style that really made you famous, it looks very 60s influenced. Have you heard that before?
Yeah. And that influence comes from the early days of Surfer Magazine.
Okay.
And, I was a young kid in the early 70s. I was already surfing at 4 and 5 years old. There was nothing really to do but go to the beach. I lived right by the beach, and my older brother surfed. And they always had these, surfer magazines laying around, and in those magazines were, the art of the time, and and a lot of the magazines were actually older, that they had like collected, that other people collected and given to them. So some of that art was from the 60s.
Yeah.
So I was looking at old magazines that people had collected. Also looked at a lot of album covers. So back in the day, you were looking at these album covers, just tripping out on them.
Yeah.
And it was part of the process of listening to music. I mean, you listen to the music and you stared at the album covers. I mean, it was
That's
awesome.
something that I think our kids are going to miss out on, which kind of bums me out, is when I was younger and you listen to a record, putting the needle on the record, like all the care you took to like dust off the record and clean
and that
it.
sound before music comes on, a little scratchy
that little
sound.
scratchy sound, and then laying on the floor with an album cover, pulling out the liner notes,
reading the
all that kind of
lyrics,
stuff, reading the lyrics.
Now you don't even know what the lyrics say.
Well, now sometimes the lyrics is just one line that's repeated over and over and over.
Yeah.
It's an experience that is now lost.
Yeah. But yeah, I was definitely influenced by that, the 60s and the 70s, and I didn't do it consciously. It just comes out. You're really, programmed with these things at a young age of what they look like and resonate with you. And I think the 60s are such a great time because it seems like the creative flow was really coming out of people then. But with that comes all the other stuff, there was a lot of frustration in that time period too. So it's a yin and yang type of thing. And for me, you don't think about it so much. I really try not to try so hard, and the ideas just kind of come out.
Yeah. That's a great segue to my next question, actually. I wanted to ask you how you approach your projects. How is it different today than it was when you were first starting? And what do you do?
Yeah, so that's a great question, and I think it's interesting because this goes back into what's it like to be an artist, and it's a lot of listening. So back in the day when I would be doing surfboards, I'd have to do 10 to 20 boards a day to make a living.
Wow.
And
that's a lot of boards.
Yeah, it's a lot. And so that was my college. I learned by repetition. So I probably painted more surfboards than anybody alive, at least more cool ones. There's probably somebody painting stripes somewhere that might have painted more stripes than me. But for me, I was doing a lot of custom stuff. And so I would have to listen to what they wanted. And so everybody was a little different, and in that listening, you really connect with them and come up with this idea that's just for them. And man, that's like such a killer feeling and connection with people. And so I got really good at that through the surfboards, having to do so many. And I used to go to this one trade show in Orlando, Florida called Surf Expo, and nobody brought surfboards there. They brought, a couple to show, and they would take orders. Well, I used to do all the boards for this company, Lost Surfboards, which I still do boards today with them, good friends of mine. But we started bringing boards and selling them because we didn't want to take them back to California with us. And we would always sell them because I was hand painting them. But we had more people wanting than we sold. So it got to the point where we're bringing 20 boards, 30 boards, 40 boards, 50 boards to hundreds of boards.
Wow.
And then we'd bring them all clear, just white. And so it's a 3-day show. I'd start early in the morning, and people knew I was going to paint them. So we would sell all the boards white, usually in the first 15 to 20 minutes of the show.
Did they even know what they were going to get?
So what they did is they would put their business card on the board, and then I would start at one end of the booth. They were on the outside of the booth, like 100 and something boards. And we'd have a huge booth, and I would paint live, like all 3 days. And so they would see me coming, progressing down, and they would show up right as I'm finishing one board, and the guy would be all excited, like, okay, I want this. And so every one of them was different, and they would get to take all the boards at the end of the show. But you can imagine how amazing that was for the individual, but also for the people watching. They would just watch this unfold. And so all that listening and being on the spot and being able to perform live allowed me to do what I do today, which is, I do bigger projects. So it could be, an album cover for a band, and they have this vision. And, I was doing the one for Sublime, and I had like 10 dudes on the conference call, and everybody's yelling ideas at me, and they're arguing, and the guy from the record company is like a bum out, and he's saying stuff. And so out of that madness comes the ideas, and the record album, it's called Sirens, really reflects that conversation. And so you get really good at this listening and pulling this information out of people, and it works with some of my more technical clients too, with it could be IBM or Western Digital hard drives, and where I got to articulate like what they're trying to teach people about their product or their services. So like if for IBM, I did this thing about the cloud.
Okay.
When the cloud came out, everybody's like, what's the cloud? I don't know what that is. And so I painted this big mural at this trade show in San Francisco of like how the cloud works, and I had like these servers in the cloud and
Right.
showing like the wireless technology, and so when people saw it, it was really easy for them to explain what it was with the visual.
I would have never thought that you would ever tell me that you painted something about something like for a tech company like that. That
Yeah.
just does not seem like the kind of stuff you paint.
Yeah.
But I bet there's a lot of stuff that you paint that people don't know you paint.
Yeah, like I was telling you earlier, I mean, a lot of people go online, they see tons of my artwork, on the internet. But some of the coolest things that I do, I can't show people due to the fact that it's proprietary to a company, or it hasn't been released, or it's for a private individual who, like I've been working with a lot of scientists and researchers, and they used that idea that I have to study. They're studying something, so they want to keep on to it, hold on to it. And I did this one mural that I can't show anybody, and it's a real bummer because it was like one of the coolest things I ever done.
Yeah.
But they kept it internal within the company.
Yeah.
And I can't even talk about the company I did it for. And but it feels really good that as an artist that that's your job, is to listen and create these things, because you have the ability to see things that other people can't.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then by painting them, you make them real.
Yeah.
And that goes with the tikis. I mean, you just think about the tikis and how these characters and these artistic sculptures, what are they trying to say with these things?
Mm-hmm.
I often think that when I'm in a place and I see this statue somewhere, and it's usually heavily eroded, and I'm just like, man, what were these people thinking? And they went through a lot of effort to create one of these things. And we have a lot of fun creating the mugs and the illustrations and stuff based off of Polynesia and some of these ideas. But we're sculpting clay. These people are chipping rocks. I mean, or carving. In Hawaii, they were doing it out of wood, which would have been hard still. But the ones out of stone are crazy.
That makes me wonder about the medium that you use, because I know that you use Posca paints. Are you still it's mostly Posca paints,
Yeah,
right? Am I saying that right?
Yep. Uniposca paint pens.
And that seems a little unorthodox for the typical painter, right? Do they just typically use latex or oils?
Yeah, so when you think of a fine artist, they would probably be pretentious and say they only work in oils and nothing else is real art. And I'm like, okay, well, that's great, or you work in acrylics.
Right.
But for me, due to the fact that I didn't go to school and was limited on money and knowledge, I was gifted the paint pens as a gift from my parents' friends. And he was an executive in Japan, and these pens were made for kindergarten kids to play with in Japan. They're non-toxic, like acrylic-based pens. He gave them to me as a gift, and he knew I was, I like to draw and stuff like that. But I instantly started painting on my surfboards with them.
Yeah. And
it was just a very unintimidating way to paint. I think a lot of kids and adults, they kind of look at it as this complicated process, and you got tubes of paint and brushes, and you can make a mess, and it's really hard to get started. The paint pens are just really easy. You have these basic colors. It doesn't make a mess. I can get an idea out. And so it was just a better way to paint. It was more efficient. And so when I had to paint surfboards like 10 to 20 in a day, it's just a better way to do it.
Yeah, you could just knock them out with those pens, right?
Yeah. Prior to that, and during that same time period, I was airbrushing boards, and mainly that's what I was doing in the factories was airbrushing.
Okay.
But it's more of a technical job. It's not creative. So you're painting flames and stripes and pin lines, and you can be creative, but it's so labor intensive that nobody wants to pay you to do that because it slows you down. And with an airbrush, it would be a loss because you would spend all this time and you wouldn't get paid much. Whereas the Posca pens allowed me to paint faster, quicker, and charge more money.
Yeah.
Which was, a better way to do it. And it took me probably 6 years before I could convince a company to let me do it on wholesale surfboards in a factory.
Oh, wow.
So I would only do it for myself and for underground surfers. And I was living in Hawaii at the time. And you couldn't get the pens anywhere outside of Japan. And lucky for me that there was an actual Japanese drugstore in Hawaii, and they were importing the pens illegally, and so I could get them from there. And I thought that it was the greatest idea ever to do this. And nobody else thought it was cool because the surfboards didn't look the way a surfboard was supposed to look.
Right.
And it wasn't until I moved to California that my friend Matt Biolis with Lost Surfboards, he let me go. And from the moment the public saw it, it took off like a skyrocket. So I went from starving to death to traveling around the world pretty quick. It was pretty nuts.
Yeah. That's you're living the dream, man.
Yeah, well, it's all I've ever done. So
So you don't know you're living the dream. It's just all you know. Yeah.
It's all I know.
As far as the Posca pens and the airbrushing and all these mediums that you use for the stuff that you typically do, is there another medium that you have used before, or is there like a dark horse that just something that that you're challenged with that you say, I want to master this particular type of medium?
I think I could pretty much master any medium at this point. I mean, I know how to paint, and I know what I want to create. Usually I'm limited by time. Somebody's not paying you to create a masterpiece. They're paying you to finish this idea, and you're under a tight timeline. So that's why the Posca pens are so great.
Yeah.
They're efficient, and the other benefit, when I started, there was no computers, there was no cell phones, there was very limited printing, and I grew with all of that. So all those things came to be, and I had to grow with it. And so one of the neat things about Posca is it translates very well to printing. And so that was great. As printing got better and better, it allowed me to build this way of painting where it just looked great.
Yeah.
And back in the day, it was really hard to create something artistically and then print it. Okay. It's almost like two different things.
Right.
And so, the technology has really benefited me, and the Posca pens just really translated to that. So, to me, I would love to use all kinds of mediums, but right now it's just the Posca's great, and it allows me to I have more ideas
and that's
time.
who you are. That's the kind of art you make, right?
Yeah, I do use spray paint. So I'm not really a graffiti artist, but I do big murals with spray paint.
Okay.
And maybe you call that graffiti, but when I'm hanging out with my graffiti artist friends, they look at me like, "What in the heck are you doing?" Because I do it all so different. And, I'll have these like gnarly graffiti dudes up in LA looking at me, like watching what I'm doing.
Right.
And I'll come up with something they've never done before. And then I'm looking at them like how they do it. And I'm like, that seems like crazy how you're doing it.
Right.
And it was just kind of neat because I feel the graffiti guys have all like learned from each other. And I didn't learn from them. I just kind of grabbed paint and started doing it. And so I came up with something different.
I bet those guys are the same way. I bet a lot of those artists, which are, I really appreciate really great street art.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of those guys are also all self-taught,
Yeah, and it just gives you a window into what's going on in the world sometimes where, these artists, I almost fell through the cracks. And every once in a while the cops will drop off some, kid that got caught graffitiing here in town, and they're like, maybe you can talk some sense into him and stuff. And I look at this kid and I feel so bad for him because they cut art out of all the schools, and he's desperately trying to find a way to contribute, or all anybody wants to feel is that they're good at something
and express himself and feel like he's got this worthwhile talent.
Yeah, and they're doing it in the shadows, and I told the kids, I was like, look, man, you got to do this, legitimately, where you're not going to get busted. And so maybe instead of painting illegally on somebody's wall, maybe talk to somebody about maybe painting their wall.
Yeah.
That's what a lot of my friends up in LA do. Different businesses have walls that they allow them to paint on, and they just paint over them and over them. They let it stay for, a month, and then it's time to paint over it again.
Yeah.
Because that's the wall that they have access to.
That's great.
So there's definitely ways to do it. And, anybody out in the world, if you know somebody who does art, try to support them and try to, point them in the right direction, especially the young people, because, you don't want somebody's dream to be over before they ever start.
Right.
You want to encourage them.
Right. Yeah. That's such a positive thought. Let's talk about the pieces that you've created in the past. I know that, we've talked about you starting on surfboards. I saw some skateboards out here. I know that you painted vans.
Yeah.
I know you painted a bunch of vans.
Yeah, I lost count.
Do you? That many, huh?
And that's all spray paint, too, the vans.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so
Okay.
that's all spray paint.
Wow.
I do them in 8 hours.
Wow, 8 hours is crazy.
Yeah.
That's crazy. Well, you knock these things out, man. If you're doing like 10 surfboards a day and then you're knocking out a van in 8 hours, that's crazy.
Yeah, it's a job. It's just, that's another thing a lot of people think about artists. Like, I don't know what people think, but I always, meet people that are kind of not really artists. They're just kind of playing artists, and they're hanging out in the coffee shop, and they got like 5 things hanging on the wall, and they talk about it and talk about it and talk about it. I'm like, dude, I did 5 things yesterday. Anybody who comes into my studio here and they see how much stuff's in here, it's a job. The vans are a great example of that. Nobody cares if it's not done. It's got to be done. You got to be able to do it in a time period that you're getting paid. If you spend too much time on it, you're not going to make a living. Yeah. I've been a professional artist now for 30 years, and I've always made a living. I've always supported my family, and it's just it's a job.
Yeah. Well, going back to these pieces, is there anything that is a favorite of yours? Do you ever get attached to any of these?
I try not to. I really feel that you got to let them go and go live out in the world and be enjoyed by people. Kind of like you bringing that mug back. It just makes me happy that it's somewhere where somebody cherishes it, and that you show it to people, and we're part of each other's story. So anytime you show that to somebody, you're like, this is done by this guy Drew, and he was probably inspired by this, by being in Fiji and being chased by these crazy local guys, and it's like you're part of the story.
Yeah.
And so I feel like all my art that's out there, and all the people who have it, have their own story, either about me or what the art means to them, and that's what's cool.
Yeah. Anything weird that you've painted? Like, what's the weirdest thing that you've painted?
Oh man, I painted some weird stuff. I painted an ostrich egg once. That was really weird.
Wow.
And I couldn't tell if the ostrich was in there anymore or not, because something was rolling around in there. I was afraid it was going to break open and be like a rotten egg.
Right.
But it's like super hard. I don't know if you ever felt one of those.
No, I haven't.
The other weirdest thing, a guy came in and he wanted me to paint this old-timey mannequin. Man, the thing was creepy because it was so real looking. I don't know what era it was from, but it was a woman. It looked like a hula girl kind of thing. And he wanted it to be, painted like she was tattooed all over her body, and, she had all the right, female parts. And so I was having to paint all this stuff, and people would come into my studio and think I was like tattooing a chick, and the thing was really cool, but like by the time I got it done, I like had to fix it up, and like I airbrushed her face so it looked real. And then I had a hat on her, like just a baseball cap. It was just something funny I did. And then the guy brought in this wig and put the wig on her, and like, man, it looked like a naked chick standing in my studio, all tattooed up with her boobs hanging out, and like,
it's starting to get creepy now, man.
And it was creepy, especially in the morning. Like, I'd be coming in and the lights would be out, and like I just see the shadow in there.
Right, you gotta look twice.
For a split second, I almost forgot. I was like, oh yeah, the creepy mannequins in there. But it turned out awesome, and the guy was stoked, and real nostalgic, like, you know, thing. And the tattoos on it were rad. I did all these cool things. Yeah.
Cool. I want to talk about how your art has evolved from the surfboard style art or the surfer kind of vibe to now you're doing this stuff that looks almost like metaphysical.
Yeah, it all happened real organically. Of course, as a surfer, every surfer becomes an amateur meteorologist.
Okay.
You're constantly studying the weather. And as an artist, I mean, nature's like amazing. So, you know, when I see waves and I'm out in the ocean and you're feeling this energy, it's like the heartbeat of the planet, right? You know, it's just like these waves are coming, they're born halfway around the world, and it took them forever to get here.
That's
and
such a great description, man. The heartbeat of the planet. Yeah, totally.
Yeah, so, you know, those waves were generated by the sun. The sun was, you know, spitting out the solar wind, and that solar wind hits the planet and affects our atmosphere with you know, pressure differentials, and then that's what those winds create the waves. And so, you know, you really feel like you're part of something bigger when you understand the dynamics of how everything's working.
Right.
And so just with that knowledge, I was already into these things, and I got hired by a company it was a research guy researching structured water. And I was like, what is that? You know, I had no idea what structured water was, but basically structured water is described as being water with information in it, in particularly within the lattice structure of its molecules. And so that gets, you know, pretty deep quick, but basically I had to find a way to paint a painting to describe what was happening inside the water and how it was happening based off this guy's research.
Oh, wow.
And they were doing this for big agriculture to create systems to make the water healthier so the plants would be healthier. And, you know, there's a lot of research.
I can see that influence on this guy right here.
Yeah. And so, you know, once that happened, every project I have to dive in, and if I don't know about that topic or I haven't been to a place, I have to either go there or I have to read or listen to podcasts or videos. And basically, these guys sent me so much information, and in 2 weeks I learned more about water than I ever knew existed. It was fascinating. And through these guys, I ended up meeting some other scientists that were studying different things, and, you know, the next thing I know, I was like listening, and the only way I knew how to really understand something is to paint it. And so I started painting all these geometry paintings, and basically they're kind of articulations of what's happening inside, you know, molecules and cells, and in the dynamics of physics, how everything's presenting itself. And I mean, it sounds really deep, but when you look at some things like the Fibonacci ratio and the golden number, and how these things are ever present in all living things, and then we see them in good art and good music and all these things, everything's kind of connected that way. All of a sudden I started understanding, you know, maybe they teach us in art school or maybe they don't, but like what makes up a good composition in a painting is the same thing that makes a flower beautiful, you know, these natural
like patterns and symmetry.
Yeah, and you know, what I found was I was already doing it in all my illustrating paintings, you know, so like I would paint these surfboards, and you like the surfboard because I made it look better. I made it look faster. It had movement to it. When you looked at that surfboard, it was like you wanted to go ride it. And so if you did it wrong, it would create the opposite effect. It would make the board look fat, slow. You'd be like, I don't want to ride that board. It's terrible. But it's the same thing with the painting. You like a painting for a reason. A lot of times you don't even know what that reason is.
Yeah.
But the artist does. The artist understands that these delicate ratios in composition is everything.
But the way that you execute these two, and I say very metaphysical, because they have a very spiritual quality to them. They're peaceful.
Yeah. And, basically it's almost like visual math.
Okay.
And, it's for those that you listening, we're talking about sacred geometry and really trying to understand basically where I'm drawing circles.
And I'll post up photos as well so that people can see this. We'll post up photos in the group page.
And so, this process is very meditative, and, this is not new. This comes from ancient, times, the Greeks and the Egypt, Babylonian. I mean, they were doing all this, trying to figure out how to build things, how to make things look good, how to measure things.
Right.
And that's what's fascinating to me. It seems that people in ancient times knew this stuff better than we did. And through my travels, I've seen it with my own eyes as far as some of these articulations, and you see it in the architecture and in the art. So my traveling has not stopped in the past 30 years. I try to go somewhere different a couple times a year. So I've been to all these radical places around the world, and not just go there and take pictures, but, I spent like a month in Egypt. I've been in and around, under, on top of all those structures with amazing people, Peru and Mexico and, places in Europe and lots of places in Polynesia. I mean, I like being places and go to somewhere where nobody's really goes, I mean, the tourist places are cool too, but, there might be some kind of like obscure thing somewhere and you're like, ask some local dude and you're like, yeah, I'll take you there.
So let's switch gears and talk about your travel, because that's something I'm also very passionate about. I think it's how you learn about the world, right?
Yeah.
Everyone lives in a different way. Even if it's here, whether you stay home or whether you go abroad, you learn about different cultures, you learn about different customs, you learn about different philosophies of living.
Mm-hmm.
And it makes you more worldly is just such a cliche for that. More cultured, more wise.
You find out we're all the same.
Yeah.
At its core, I mean, if you took the language barrier out and people actually talk to each other, you'd find out that everybody, wants the same things.
They all want the same thing.
And it's very frustrating to, hear anything negative about a place or anything like that, because I always say, well, I've been there and I met those people, and they're not at all like you say or how the news says or something like that.
Right.
I mean, sure, there's, people in every place that, aren't that great. But the majority of people are cool.
Yeah.
And I caught a lot of flack for going to Egypt, and people were like, oh, it's dangerous, this, that, and the other. The Egyptians are cool, man. Those people were great. And, I sat there and listened to them, tell me about, their life and what it's like. And I loved every minute of it. And every place is like that. I love being in Asia. Like, I had to work in China, and it was like, people were like going, oh yeah, they're running like slave factories over there. Man, I showed up in the factory, and there was like cool kids listening to iPods. They're stoked. They're working. They're joking. They're having fun. And I was like, man, it's not like that at all. Like, not saying there's not those kind of places over there, but my experience was amazing.
Yeah.
The other thing is like the food. Like, people are like got like great food everywhere.
Right.
I ate what was it, 2 summers ago, I was in the middle of nowhere in Mexico, in the central, at these pyramids, and went to a restaurant, and they served me ant eggs.
Oh, really?
And like, I've eaten some crazy things, but I think that was the craziest thing I've eaten.
What was it like?
It was awesome. They were like sweet.
Oh, wow.
They almost looked like rice, like fatter rice, but they were like these fire ant eggs, and they served them like as a little taco. And
how do they prepare it?
Yeah, it was like a little taco. I think they're.
But I mean, is it like fried, like pan fried?
I think they fried them.
Okay.
And I mean,
interesting.
Yeah, it was just crazy, and
And that's the thing about travel too, is it opens your mind to try things like that, right? Because then you just look at it as like, okay, this is what they eat here, so I'm gonna try it. Yeah. It's not weird to you because no matter where you go, it's always going to be different what they're eating.
Yeah, I remember like I was surfing in Tahiti, and we'd been surfing all day, and we go to leave, and everywhere in Tahiti you have to take a boat. You take this boat out to the reef. The reef's pretty far out, and my friend Moana, goes, "Oh man, I need to get dinner." So like we're about to leave, we're all like loaded up in the boat, and he jumps over with a mask and a spear gun, and he I'm like, what? He goes and spears this big old parrotfish. Wow. And like comes in and goes, all right, we're gonna eat tonight. And like I was just like, no way. And I felt bad because I'd been surfing all day with this parrotfish, and like he just got speared, and we're gonna eat him. But man, it was really good.
Right.
But that experience is pretty rad.
Yeah. I've seen cultures. I can't remember where I was. I've been all over the world too. Probably not as much as you have, but I've been to a lot of different places. And there was a place where prior to eating, they wanted to say a prayer for the animal that gave up its life so that we could live.
Yeah.
Right. And that's the way that they did it. They respected the animal and thanked it for giving up its life so that it could nourish us.
Yeah.
And I thought that was a really eye-opening thing, that we take a lot of that for granted, right? You go down, you get a burger from McDonald's or something. You don't think about the slaughter that happened to bring that burger to you,
Yeah. And it's interesting you say that, because I actually do. Like I had, that's another thing about being an artist is like, and I know most people don't, but like sometimes I'll be sitting there like at somebody's house, like we'll be somewhere and it's like a potluck, let's say, and all this amazing food's there. And usually I think about it, especially with vegetables, and I'm like sitting there and I'm like, all this stuff had to grow, and it took so much time to grow, and then it was harvested and brought here, and like, where did all this stuff come from to come to this table? Like, then I look at the rice dish, and I'm like, okay, where did that rice come from? Did it come from?
Wow, you like really break everything down.
Yeah, and then you're like, somebody opens a bottle of wine, I'm like, okay, there's grapes grew somewhere, and like, all of a sudden you're just sitting there, and you're like, whoa, this is like,
yeah.
And if you looked at it from that perspective more, you'd have such appreciation.
Yeah, totally.
And not just for the plant itself, but the people who
brought it there,
who grew it and made the wine, and
that's what I mean by that. Who brought it there? The people who had to harvest the vegetables and had to everything that was made. Yeah,
and so I do that with everything. And like the artistic mind is like crazy, and maybe I am. I don't know, but I see like everything as design, and so I'm always like looking at this good design, bad design. It could be furniture. It could be, this microphone. Does this function or does it not? And, people don't think about these things. Like I see a light plug, like a light switch, and I'm like thinking like, the wires are going here, and like just all that's happening at once. Yeah. And
you were born to be an artist, man.
Yeah,
you've got that mind.
And you forget sometimes that not everybody's thinking this way. Yeah. It's like a hyper awareness or something, and
right.
It's kind of a curse too, because
I can imagine.
Yeah, you're just like you're just tripping out on everything.
There's one travel story that you haven't mentioned that I want to bring up because I find this particularly fascinating. Tell us about your stand-up paddle adventure on the Colorado River at the Grand Canyon.
Oh, yeah. Wow, I almost forgot about that one. I don't know how I could forget. That was amazing. Yeah, so my buddy and I were the first two guys to paddle the entire Grand Canyon on the Colorado River. So it was like 260-something miles. And
On a stand-up paddleboard.
On the stand-up paddleboard, yeah. So, I was lucky to be an early adopter of the stand-up paddleboard. And if anybody hasn't done it, do it. It's awesome. Maybe do it on flat water, not the Colorado, because
yeah, there's rapids on the Colorado.
Yeah, so number one, it's just like such a different experience. The Colorado and the Southwest is just unbelievable, and to experience the Grand Canyon via the Colorado is a chance of a lifetime. Not many people get to do it.
I was going to say you're doing something, and this particular thing that you did with a stand-up paddleboard is even more unique. But you do something that most people don't get to experience.
Yeah, in just the visual alone, forget about the athleticism and the logistics of doing it. Just the aesthetics of viewing the Grand Canyon from the river for that amount of time. It took us 16 days to do it. Was life-changing, and it takes you totally out of the modern world because you're so in the moment every second of every day.
Right.
And there's nothing modern. Right. No phones. You don't even see any airplanes or helicopters. You don't see any other people. Every once in a while you might see somebody, but you feel like you're fighting for your life every day. And it's cold. The water's 42 degrees.
Wow.
You're in a wetsuit, have a helmet, life jacket. There's things that could drown you and kill you every 10 feet.
Wow.
Honestly, I had no idea how difficult and amazing and dangerous it was going to be. I got invited on the trip because some friends of mine had that you have to win a lottery to do this.
Oh.
And so very few people get to do this every year, and due to it's so dangerous. And so we put together this trip, and it was 15 people in rafts, and we got to go on stand-up boards. And so
How many were on the stand-ups?
Just my friends Seth Warren and I.
Just the two of you.
Just the two of us.
And then the people on the rafts, were they kind of guides? Were they like first aid, that kind of stuff? Or?
No, they were his parents.
Okay.
His parents are the ones that won the lottery, and they invited all their friends. They were all up there in age. They were all in their late 60s, early 70s. And every one of them, it was their dream to do the Grand Canyon.
Oh, that's so cool. So they were there for the expedition.
Yeah, and so these people are, hardcore whitewater rafting people. And, basically their whole lives they've been wanting to do the Grand Canyon, but it's so difficult to get a spot that nobody had ever won the lottery. Yeah. And so when Seth's parents won the lottery, they invited all their friends who were probably never going to get to do it, and this was their last chance.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
And so Seth and I got to go, and at first the Park Service in the Grand Canyon were laughing at us because there had been two other people that had tried to do it and didn't succeed because of its difficultness. And so we had to have a spot on one of the rafts in case something happened.
Okay.
But we were determined to do every inch of that river on our stand-ups, and we did. But they were laughing at us, saying it was going to be impossible, that there was no way we were going to be able to do it. And it was terrifying.
You proved them wrong.
Yeah, but what ended up happening is the SUP ended up being the perfect vehicle to play lifeguard. Yeah, because it's dangerous for the boats too. And that year, it was 2011. The water was really high, so the rapids, for those of you who don't know, the Grand Canyon is just gnarly. It has some mega rapids in it.
Yeah.
And they scale at 1 to 10. Most rapids, I think, are 1 to 5. And the rapids are just so big there. I mean, it looks like you're going over a ski slope.
Wow.
With giant moguls in it and rocks sticking out. Like, imagine being at the top of a mountain, and but you have to go. You don't get to look first.
Yeah.
And you get up over the top, and you look, and it's just straight down with moguls with big rocks sticking out of it. And that's what all those rapids were like.
And you were doing this on a stand-up paddleboard.
Yeah, and we got killed like so many times, and our whole mission was to survive a rapid, and we survived some, but we got murdered on most of them.
Yeah, wow.
And but what ended up happening is we became the lifeguards in the sweeps. So we would usually have Seth would be in the front, or I'd be in the back, be in the sweep, making sure everybody was okay. And in the big heavy rapids, we went first every time. And then we would go on either side of the rapid to make sure if a boat had a problem, like got flipped, we would be there to rescue them. And the rule was rescue people first, people first, boats second, and then supplies. Because these boats would get stuck in these rapids, and 16-foot boat would get sucked underwater and then spit out, and they would start flipping. And that centrifugal force would launch the people out, and all the stuff would get thrown out. And we saved a bunch of people, and people that weren't even on our trip. And that was a crazy thing, because there's no escape. Once you enter the Grand Canyon, there's no getting out, and so you have to do it. And we did have a satellite phone in case there was an emergency where they could send a helicopter, but it was like $10,000 to call the helicopter, so you didn't want to get hurt or bit by a snake or something. It could be. Right. But man, some of the Indian stuff in there was amazing. There's like all these Indian ruins and petroglyphs and paintings, and man, we hiked up to this one that was like so far up, and like with these death-defying cliffs, and they built this stone structure up on this spire that we hiked to, and like I was terrified. I hate heights. And it was like super windy.
Oh man.
And I'm in this like little building on top of this thing out in the middle of the Grand Canyon, out in the middle of nowhere. And I'm like, why did they build this thing here?
Yeah.
Like, what is this place? And it seemed it was like a defensive position, like you could see down both sides of the river.
Right.
But man, I wonder how many Indians died building that place, because it was terrifying. I like crawled on my hands and knees into this building, and there was like sheer drop-offs on either side.
Wow.
So we did stuff like that, and man, I slept so good. You just fall face first in the sand.
Yeah.
And it was like a military expedition. You'd had to set up your camp and food, and it was a leave no trace, so everything went in and out. It was a lot of work.
What's your next expedition after this one? Let me ask you this question. Is there anywhere in the world that you haven't traveled yet that you want to see?
Oh, there's so many. I'll never get to go everywhere, but I'm going to try. I don't know. We went through the last 6 years or so. We've been doing stuff all in America. So, driving around in a van, and just, America's so amazing. Yeah. There's so many places that are still like, you're in Southern California, you think it's so crowded, or the Northeast, and you think it's so crowded, and most of our country is like empty. There's like nothing, just forest and deserts, and, it doesn't matter where you go. There's something beautiful about everywhere. Yeah. So I want to go to Angkor Wat. I'd love to go to Micronesia. There's a site there. I like going to ancient sites.
And I love that these spots that you're traveling to aren't all surf destinations.
Yeah, that's the other thing is, I have gotten into going to places that are just, off the beaten path.
Yeah.
And, some of these places are super hard to go to too.
Pretty cool.
Yeah.
So, one of the things I like to do, and this has been a really great interview, and I appreciate so much you giving me your time here, Drew.
Yeah.
Now I want to ask you some fun questions.
All right.
If a movie were to be made about your life, who do you think should play you?
Oh. I don't know. I'm kind of a funky dude.
I think I have a great answer for that. But I'm curious who
you
think. Oh, you want me to go first? So I think Matthew McConaughey.
I can see that dude. He's pretty nice. He's much more. He's better looking.
I could just see him fitting right into your role. and being Drew Brophy. I could tell the surfing, the traveling, the art, all of it.
Yeah, I could see that.
The free thinking,
there's also like this hard edge side of me too, especially like when things get serious, like with like surfing big waves and stuff like that, because I love surfing big waves, that all the fun stuff goes out and it's just like, this is real, and it also gets like that in like in emergencies and things. I've been in some like gnarly accidents and gnarly weather events where, things are getting ready to go bad, and for some reason I always get nominated to do the gnarly thing, and so that becomes like more of a James Bond type of thing.
Yeah, there you go.
Like I was in Indonesia when our boat was about to go up on this reef and we were stuck on the bottom, and I was taking a nap and they called me like, dude, we got to save the boat, and I'm like, well, dude, we have to get off all the bottom, and the anchor chain was all stuck, and so I'm diving off the boat and like having to fix this thing, and like I don't know, I think that maybe an action hero or something.
How about John Philbin, the guy who played Turtle in North Shore?
Oh, I know that guy. That guy's cool.
He was on my podcast a couple months ago.
Yeah, that dude's cool.
Yeah,
man.
He's super cool.
Yeah, he could do it.
Yeah, because he's a surfer, so I could see him. And then he played one of the bank robbers in Point Break.
Yeah.
So he's got like that badass side, and he's got the surfer side, the waterman guy.
Yeah, John, you got the job.
So there you go. So John Philbin. That's what we're gonna put John in that role.
I hope he can swim real good.
If you could spend a day with anyone real or fictitious, dead or alive, who would you choose?
Oh, Tesla.
Oh, there you go. Great answer. And you knew that right away.
Yeah, I'd love to hang out with Nikola Tesla.
Yeah. All right. If you were stranded on a desert island, what's the one thing you couldn't live without?
Whoa. Probably my wife and kids.
Oh, dude, that's my answer.
Yeah.
My answer is my family.
Yeah.
Because people will think like, oh, maybe an ukulele so I can keep myself entertained. Or
I
maybe
can make a ukulele out of stuff.
Right. Yeah, that's awesome, man. That's my answer too.
Yeah, I'd hate to be that. What's the one dude that got stuck with the volleyball?
Yeah.
On the island. Poor dude.
Tom Hanks.
Yeah.
And the last question: if you weren't creating art for a living, what do you think you'd be doing today?
Surfing.
Okay. There you go.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, I tell my wife all the time, I'm like, if I didn't have to make a living, providing for my family, like let's say I won the lottery, I mean, I'd just be surfing around the world.
There you go.
I mean, I'd probably still do art for fun, but like, it wouldn't be my plan to like create some masterpiece and, pay for it myself. I'd just be living, man.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like you already are, though,
You're trying, I think, it's a good message for everybody is like, this is it, man.
Yeah.
You don't save it for a rainy day. Do a little bit. Some of the best advice, I forget who even said this, but I heard this once, and I was already doing it, but instead of saving up for this, grand vacation at the end of your life, I use this, how should I say it? I got this from my grandparents. My grandparents they worked hard their whole lives, and they were old. Like, they looked old when they were young, They were probably in their 60s. They looked like they were 80, and they finally retired, and their dream was to go to Hawaii. And they had this picture in their house of these two old people with leis on at a luau. And I just looked at it, and I was just so bummed for them, because that's not the time to be going to Hawaii and going to a luau as these two elderly people.
Yeah.
You want to go when you're young, and you can go party, and you can go skinny dipping, and you can, enjoy everything. You can go do the hikes. And so I think my message to people is, take little retirements every year. So when you're old and gray, you don't have to go anywhere. There's all these pictures of you doing all these fantastic things, and maybe you don't move so good anymore, and you just go, hey, honey, remember when we did this? Remember when we did that? And
you can look back at an amazing life.
Yeah, because those things can never be taken away from you. Yeah. You can lose all your money and your health and all that kind of stuff, but those experiences, nobody can take those from you.
Very wise words.
And So get out there and go do stuff.
There you go. Drew, I want to sincerely thank you for taking the time to sit down with me.
Yeah, man.
I wish that we didn't have 17 years between the time we first met and having a conversation like this.
Yeah, maybe it's just the right time.
Maybe it was. I mean, it was very inspiring conversation.
Thank you. Yeah.
So thank you so much. I enjoyed the stories that you shared. I enjoy your art. What's the future of Drew Brophy art?
I'm just going to keep going further. One of the things that we're doing is we're doing like an online thing where we're going to be teaching people how to paint. So I always envision that, give people these tools to do art themselves. I really feel like there's a lot of people out there who feel like the things that they're good at, nobody cares about. And I kind of want to change that. I want to give people the tools to do art as a profession or for fun. And so that's kind of one of the things that we're working on.
Very
give
cool.
the gift of art. And there again, it doesn't matter how good it is. It's the experience of doing it. And
very cool.
Yeah, so that's what we're up to.
So if anybody wants to see your art, wants to purchase your art, or wants any more information about you and what you do here at the gallery, can we give out your website and your social media and all that?
Yeah, everything's just under Drew Brophy. So DrewBrophy. And that's drewbrophy.com, Drew Brophy Instagram, all that kind of stuff, Facebook. And yeah, we're everywhere. I mean, we've grown through all this technology. I'm interested to see what's next with technology, really.
Yeah.
And that the learning platform we're doing is another thing about adapting technology that, we do online, or not online, but we do live classes, and we can only teach like 10 to 20 people at a time. And there's people everywhere that want or need to have this joy. So that platform is going to allow us to work with thousands of people at a time. And I just think that's amazing.
Very cool.
And then maybe I can go visit those people.
Yeah. Well, there you go, folks. DrewBrophy.com. Check him out on Instagram also at Drew Brophy. Is it Drew Brophy? Drew Brophy Art?
Drew Brophy.
Type in Drew Brophy. His name will come up.
Yeah.
And if you guys have any questions, comments, or just want to leave a shout out, you can hit us up at the group page on Facebook, Inside the Desert Oasis Room. Check out our website, desertoasisroom.com, or follow us on Instagram at Polynesian Pop. Thank you again, Drew. Appreciate it so much. Aloha.
Yeah, life's good. Bye.
Cheers.